समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
I'm sure you heard the government's latest decision change on India's third aircraft carrier, and you must be wondering what's going on. India's strategic interests in the Indian Ocean region require a strong naval presence across both its western and eastern flanks. So, ideally, this would mean operating 3 aircraft carriers. 2 actively deployed, while the third undergoes maintenance or retrofits. Now, this has long been the Indian Navy's vision for achieving true blue water capabilities. Now, within naval circles, aircraft carrier command is often seen as the pinnacle of naval leadership, fueling an ongoing rivalry between proponents of carrier-based power projection and those advocating for submarine dominance. However, financial and operational constraints have forced the Navy to scale back its ambitions, with only 2 carriers in service for the foreseeable future. The third carrier, size of INS Vikrant, when commissioned, will likely serve as a replacement for the aging INS Vikramaditya rather than expanding the fleet. While the long-term goal remains 3 carriers, this reality is unlikely to change for at least a decade or even more. Like I said, the government's recent decision on carrier acquisition has sparked intense debate over whether it signifies a fundamental shift in India's naval doctrine or simply a pragmatic adjustment by focusing more on nuclear-powered submarines or the SSNs. However, the evolving strategic landscape suggests that rigid binary perspectives on, this either-or approach may no longer be sufficient to understand India's maritime security challenges. But first, what is a blue water navy? A blue water navy is technically defined as a maritime force capable of operating globally. But then India is not an expeditionary power like the United States or France. Now, unlike these nations, India does not maintain permanent deployments far from its mainland or operate bases in distant locations. Actually, India's naval objectives are twofold. Strategically speaking, it focuses on power projection within the Indian Ocean region and ensuring freedom of navigation across the broader Indo-Pacific. And tactically speaking, its priority is to adapt to evolving security challenges, particularly as the Indo-Pacific becomes increasingly vulnerable to hybrid threats. But there are budgeting issues in ensuring what kind of battle readiness we require. Aircraft carriers remain a crucial and a highly visible symbol of a nation's naval strength and battle readiness. Please note that power projection will remain an essential for the Indian Navy, even if border disputes with China are resolved. The Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, is committed to containing India's rise, both on land, which means continentally, and at sea. India and China will always need to manage their relationship, but they will never be aligned, regardless of what pro-China enthusiasts suggest. Now, why do I say so? While China seeks a unipolar Asia led by Beijing, India envisions a multipolar Asia with itself as a key player or a key pole. And these worldviews do not reconcile. It's not just about the LSE. However, our biggest challenge remains funding. India's indigenous aircraft carrier is estimated to cost about $5 billion worth of dollars, which is far cheaper than what the US spends on its carriers. But even this $5 billion exceeds the Navy's entire budget for procuring new capabilities. And there is more complication. The capability of India's carriers, which is measured in displacement, is far less, in fact, almost half of what the Chinese carriers have. Forget what the US has, which is greater than the Chinese. Another important point, When I say battle ready, it is often interpreted in a conventional sense, referring to preparations for a potential full scale war. Now, while that remains true, of course, the reality becomes far more complex when viewed through the lens of the Indo Pacific security dynamics. The region is already entrenched in what is known as gray zone warfare, constantly navigating tensions and uncertainties, even without an outright conventional conflict breaking out. Now, what are some important maritime lessons that we can learn? The Russia Ukraine war offers some crucial lessons for India as well as for other nations, highlighting both conventional and hybrid warfare scenarios. So, conventionally speaking, in the Black Sea, Ukraine has successfully countered Russia's naval power through a combination of advanced drones like the Magura V5, Neptune missiles, and precise intelligence gathering. Despite Russia's superior naval strength by every stretch of imagination, including aircraft carriers, warships, and frigates, it has been forced to redeploy its Black Sea fleet from Sevastopol in Crimea to Novorossiysk and is now even considering a new port in Georgia's breakaway region in Abkhazia. Now, this shift tells us about Russia's struggle to combat modern asymmetric threats. While Ukraine remains disadvantaged on land, of course, its naval successes demonstrate key takeaways for future maritime warfare. Now, a different dynamic is unfolding in the Baltic Sea, a region historically vulnerable to hybrid attacks. This vulnerability has kind of intensified following the Ukraine war, especially with Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Although a full scale conflict or a full scale war between NATO and Russia appears unlikely, the Baltic Sea remains a hotspot for grey zone warfare. Attacks on critical infrastructure. I'm sure you've heard about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the Baltic Connector pipeline between Finland and Estonia, different attacks on undersea communication cables. All these highlight the growing threat scenario. In response, countries like France, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and many others, along with NATO and the EU, have ramped up investments in unmanned underwater vehicles or the UUVs to monitor and protect vital maritime infrastructure. When these lessons are applied to the Indo Pacific, the security challenges become even more complex. Why do I say so? Unlike Europe, the Indo Pacific lacks a tangible security alliance or an architecture to counter hybrid threats. While regional actors balance great power rivalries and China's unilateral moves to alter the status quo, they remain poorly equipped to tackle hybrid threats. Now, this reality reiterates the need for India to enhance its maritime power projection, not just for strategic influence, but also for securing its own deployments. Challenges such as the vulnerability of critical infrastructure, China's destabilizing activities, and the unregulated use of artificial intelligence or the AI make it clear that waiting for a full-fledged conflict to address security concerns is not really an option. So, if I want to connect these dots to India again, two key lessons emerge. First, being battle ready extends beyond conventional warfare to include countering hybrid threats. Second, while India may aspire to a third aircraft carrier, financial constraints and evolving maritime threats suggest a more pragmatic focus on submarines, particularly nuclear powered attack submarines, the SSNs, that can remain submerged for extended periods. And of course, underwater drones. Now, just as air warfare or the aerial warfare has transformed with drone swarms making battlefields more transparent, underwater warfare is becoming increasingly accessible and unpredictable due to the advancements in sea drones. Unlike costly aircraft carriers, the sea drones, ranging in size, capability, and function, can carry out diverse missions. From monitoring environmental changes to targeting warships and critical infrastructure, they can do it all. Then there is another issue. Their affordability also enables a plausible deniability, as technologically adept adversaries and non state actors can develop effective sea drones using commercially available and sometimes off the shelf components. Even the most advanced explosive latency drones cost significantly lesser than long range missiles, let alone SSNs or the insanely expensive aircraft carriers. In the pre-drone era, stealth submarines were ideal for remaining undetected while maintaining sea control. However, with technological advancements, China's SSN program is already integrating submarine and drone capabilities. Now that's interesting. Reports suggest Beijing has developed the Feiye, a drone capable of launching from a submarine, transitioning between sea and air, and returning to the same vessel. Now, this innovation signals a future where traditional distinctions between submarines and drones really start to blur, allowing unmanned systems to be piloted with greater precision and efficiency and at a far less cost. Now, for India, delaying a third aircraft carrier is not merely an option. Given budgetary limitations and the evolving hybrid warfare landscape, an additional carrier is unlikely to serve India's maritime security needs effectively. Instead, India must prioritize SSNs, underwater drones, and advanced missile capabilities to counter the growing naval power imbalance with China. Strengthening MDA, or the maritime domain awareness, through partnerships with key allies such as the Quad allies or with France, as well as with the European Union, these kind of arrangements are going to be essential. Enhancing data sharing mechanisms, complementing the IFC-IOR with over 40 participating countries already, will further bolster India's ability to navigate an increasingly contested maritime domain. Now, you may be noticing that Prime Minister Modi is heading to Paris for the AI summit hosted by France. And it is essential that New Delhi and Paris discuss cooperation on the UUVs, or unmanned underwater vehicles, or sea drones. Now, France has already offered India technology for co-developing both SSNs, which are nuclear-powered attack subs, and advanced UUVs to counter China's expanding sea drone capabilities. And this offer was made last year. While DRDO's plan to equip or retrofit submarines with indigenous AIP, of course, is promising, the problem is that the timeline remains uncertain. Indigenous development must go hand in hand with foreign collaboration when it is absolutely necessary. Rather than viewing it as a binary, India should prioritize co-development and co-production, ensuring a higher degree of indigenized content, or IC, to stay afloat in this evolving domain. Finally, before I conclude, I have to talk a little bit about a larger problem. Discussions about India's maritime strategy, whether focused on sea denial versus sea control, or the debate between aircraft carriers versus SSNs, often feel incomplete and directionless. As Admiral Arun Prakash rightly pointed out in his post on X, such debates will remain inconclusive unless they are anchored in a clearly defined national security strategy. Without this foundation, these discussions risk becoming mere ad hoc reflections rather than meaningful and synergistic progress. India's strategic aspirations continue to be shaped by a pattern of reactive and ad hoc decision making, which hinders long-term strategizing. The real concern is that when this issue is highlighted, it is often dismissed as not India's way. Despite the evident setbacks in our military planning and procurements caused by shifting priorities and all the lost time in pursuing an ever-elusive goal. 2025 promises to bring an overhaul of India's indigenous production and procurement woes. I'll be back to discuss that and more. Stay tuned.